we were talking about chapter 3, the question of Christ, in Helmut Thielicke's The Son of the God book.
Yes.
You can look down in the links down below. I'll have a link to the book so that if you want to buy it, you can buy it. You can probably get it from your library, from a library. I don't know if it's in all libraries, but yeah. And the start of that chapter is from Matthew 21:25 through 27.
Yeah, and I think we've read that on this podcast before, but want me to read it again?
Yeah.
Okay, let me read that. Here's the passage with which Helmut Thielicke deals in his sermon, The Question of Christ. I quote from Matthew 21. The baptism of John, whence was it? From heaven or of men? And they reasoned with themselves, asking, what shall we say? You see, they're responding to Jesus' question here, right?
Yeah.
What shall we say? From heaven? He will say unto us, why did ye not then believe him? But if we say, of men, we fear the people, for all hold John as a prophet. And they answered Jesus and said, we cannot tell. And he said unto them, neither tell I you by what authority I do these things. And Thielicke mentions in his sermon what an odd way that is for Jesus to talk to these people, right? He asked them, where do you think I get my authority? Because the big issue here is, where does Jesus get his authority, right?
Right.
That's the big issue here. And they're wondering, where does Jesus get his authority to say and do the kinds of things he says and does, right? And Jesus says to them, well, first of all, answer me this question. Where did John the Baptist, was his word and teaching? Was his word and teaching from heaven, or was it merely from men, from people? And they said, well, that's a sticky wicket, they say among themselves. They're talking to themselves. That's a sticky wicket, because if we say that's merely from men, we fear the people because they think John is more of a godly man than that. And if we say from God, Jesus will simply say to us, well, then why didn't you follow him if you really thought it was from God? So that puts them between a rock and a hard place, right?
Yeah.
And so they ponder this in their hearts, obviously, and among themselves. And they finally then answer Jesus officially, and they say, we can't tell. We don't have the answer. We're not going to say. And Jesus says, well, then, I'm not going to tell you from where my authority comes from.
That seems fair.
Yep. Well, it seems fair, but it seems odd that Jesus says this, right? And that's what Thielicke kind of starts with. He starts with that kind of conflict in the story. And that's a good way to start a sermon, by the way. You often start by noting the conflict, right? What's odd about this? What would you have had Jesus say, right?
Yeah.
Right? We probably would have Jesus say, well, it's obviously, I'm obviously from God the Father. Look at the things that have happened from what I've done here, Look at the healings, right? We would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't your life better off now than it was 4 years ago? Wouldn't Jesus say that?
Yeah.
Right? That's what we would say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, he doesn't. He seems to be more coy with them, right, for some reason. And that's how Thielicke opens the sermon, is to talk about that conflict, that sort of missing piece. Why does Jesus give them that kind of an answer, right? So that's where he starts. I noted, when I took some notes on this, I noted that it seems snarky of Jesus. He's like playing cat and mouse games with them. Oh, you're not going to tell me where John gets his authority? I'm not going to tell you where I get mine either then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are reasons they're asking in the first place, though, right? Thielicke gives a litany of options. They hear about the miracles that are happening. They hear about the astounding teachings that Jesus gives, right? Like the
Right.
Sermon on the Mount, which has happened before this, the Sermon on the Mount has happened.
Okay.
They've heard about all of that, so that's what's making them ask the question. Something really remarkable is going on with this guy, and maybe in some ways it disturbs them too, right?
Yeah.
It would disturb you and me, wouldn't it, if all of a sudden we hear about this guy walking around doing amazing teachings, right?
Yeah. The cynic in us would be like, is it real?
Yeah,
Are you really doing this, or is it some sort of trick?
right,
Could the devil have sent you instead
right.
to lead us astray?
That's what we might say. As a matter of fact, when I was growing up, I grew up in a charismatic Pentecostal church, and other churches would say about us, right? Because
Yeah.
we were charismatic and Pentecostal, we believed in faith healings and things like that,
Yeah.
and speaking in tongues and things like that. And other churches would say about us, "Oh, that's from the devil."
Yeah.
Right? And that was their way of explaining that, to say we were from the devil. It's interesting, right? I think people said that about Jesus at some point too, right? You get your power from Beelzebul, from the devil.
Yeah.
It's a common fallback position people have, right? Yeah, it's one common. So they're wondering, who is this Jesus? Where's he getting this authority? So it's a genuine question, right? It's a genuine question. So we're still stuck though, wondering, why does he answer in the way that he does, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anytime somebody does something amazing, like people said Jimi Hendrix got his music from the devil.
Yes.
And
Right.
whether he did or not, anyone that does anything amazing, there's always going to be people who are trying to pull you back down. However talented you are. It's called
Right.
crab bucketing.
Right.
Have you heard of that?
No. Explain that. What is it called?
Crab bucketing?
Crab bucketing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you take a bunch of crabs and you put them in a bucket,
Okay.
you don't have to put a lid on top. They'll hold each other in.
Oh, okay.
And if any of them try and climb out, the others will actually pull them back down.
Oh,
and
yeah.
sometimes they'll actually
Huh.
rip them apart and eat
Oh,
them.
yeah. Yeah.
And you see this a lot in smaller communities
Yeah.
or poor communities. If you see somebody that's starting to become more successful than the rest of them, they're like,
Yeah.
you need to know your place, get back down here.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want you to rise up and become more.
Yeah.
They want you to stay down here with us.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting human activity.
It is. Yeah. That reminds me of a television show that I saw, where a young woman always felt she hadn't quite gone as far as she would have in life, because she never went to college.
Mm-hmm.
She thought she was rejected by a college. Lo and behold, she found out years later she had been accepted, but her father hid the letter of acceptance. He didn't show it to her. Right? That's
Yeah,
crab
that's crab
bucketing.
bucketing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
He
don't
didn't-
want you to
he,
go and do this.
he wanted her in his world.
Yeah,
He didn't want her to achieve anything, right? Yeah.
yeah,
That would take her away from his world.
yeah,
So he was crab bucketing,
yeah.
right? Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, they do that. And what I notice as the sermon progresses with Thielicke,
Mhm.
because you keep wondering throughout this, Jesus does all these amazing things. And by the way, the thing that's unique about Jesus is that he not only teaches, he does. Right? That's one of the keys that Thielicke points out in the sermon. Jesus is not only a great teacher, he's a great doer.
Yeah,
Right? And that's what's really got people, that's what has the buzz going, the conversation about Jesus, all the talk in the community
yeah,
and roundabouts. Word is spreading fast that this guy not only has amazing teachings, but he also does. He
yeah.
accomplishes things. He heals people. The blind are seeing. They say the lame are walking. The
Mhm.
crippled folks are walking.
Yeah,
All of that stuff is happening. So Jesus is not only able to teach on the blackboard, he brings it into real life, right?
right.
You always like a teacher who can not only go to the PowerPoint or to the or to the drawing board or the whiteboard or whatever, or the textbook, but can also bring that stuff into real everyday life, right?
Right.
Right. Some of us never had that math teacher who was able to bring that math into the real world for us, right?
Yeah.
Probably not you, because you ended up as an engineer, so you must have had a good math teacher someplace.
I had a number of good math
Yeah,
teachers. Yeah.
yeah, somebody who was able to bring it into reality for you.
Yeah.
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 That's good.
My uncle had a guy like that. When he went to college, he ended up signing up for a math class that was way above his abilities.
Oh yeah.
And so when the guy was teaching, he was like just completely lost. And he's like, "Look, I think I'm in the wrong class." And the guy sat down with him and figured out where he was, and he was able to teach him like how to do math.
Yeah.
Like in the sense of like how to do math, so that whenever you approach any sort of math problem, you knew how to work your way through it.
Oh
and
yeah.
It just like
clicked for him.
clicked everything into place, and
Yeah.
so
That's great. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it there are people out there that can really do that, where they can
Yeah. Teach.
it and like click things into place, so that it's not just you're repeating back what you heard before, but you actually understand it. It's a different level
Yes. Right.
of learning.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I think of it like puzzle pieces sitting on your brain. Like you might have it
Yeah.
in the right spot, but it's
Yeah.
not actually clicked into place,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that you you really understand and really know it.
Yeah.
Versus you just parrot it back.
Yeah.
I know a lot of my college years, I was able to parrot it back and I got good grades, but
Yeah.
didn't really understand it. So
Yeah.
that knowledge is pretty much gone for me now.
That happens. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But somehow Jesus has this way of bringing it home like that,
Yeah.
making it click for people, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that he's so effective as a teacher and a preacher, is that he brings it home. He actually takes it off the whiteboard and off the PowerPoint into everyday life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and he actually embodies it. He talking about the covenant with man. Wait a second. Speaking of fatherly love and things like that, a lot of these preachers or these Pharisees talked about fatherly love, but they didn't actually embody it when they went out into the public. Like they didn't talk to
Right.
the common man. They didn't give love to the poor, the diseased,
Right.
the thieves and prostitutes and all of them.
Right.
Like they didn't try and reach those people. They just
Right.
left them in the gutter and
Yeah.
ignored them.
Yeah.
But
Right.
that's not what Jesus did. He went into the gutter.
Yeah. He puts his hand forth and lifts people
Yeah.
out of that gutter. Yeah. 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 That's the. Yeah. That's the. I know I have to preach a sermon this coming Good Friday. I have to preach a short sermon because it's one of several people preaching. But I have to preach on the one of the 7 last words of Jesus. And the one that I've been assigned is he looks at, from the cross, he's suffering and dying on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
He looks down at Mary, his mother, and a disciple who was very special to him. John calls him the disciple whom Jesus loved, right?
Okay.
Very special disciple. They're both standing with others at the foot of the cross, watching Jesus suffer and die. And in his dying moment, Jesus says to them, to his mother, he says, "Woman, behold your son. Look at your son," meaning the disciple.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says to the disciple, "Behold your mother." Okay. That's interesting because, as one preacher said about that instance in the death of Jesus, he said, this shows us that the cross of Christ and his sufferings and everything his life is about and his death is about is not only about eternity or heaven, it also involves the here and now. Because even on the cross as he dies, he addresses a need.
Yeah.
Because his mother, she won't have a life insurance policy, right?
No.
Now, where Jesus' siblings are in this instance, it's a good question.
Yeah.
That's part of the conflict of of that story, by the way. Something that brings to us a conflict in our own thoughts about the story. Where's his brothers, right?
Yeah.
Because he had some. John even tells us he had siblings.
Right.
So where are they? And so why is he assigned? Well, what's really going on there is he's not only caring for the need of his mother, right?
Yeah.
He's also creating a new kind of family from the cross. It's a family beyond biological ties. And that's characteristic of John's gospel.
Mm-hmm.
There's always more going on in John's gospel. If you ever notice this with John, there's always more going on than what you see on the surface.
Okay.
For example, in John, water is never just water.
Okay. Yeah.
It's also used to talk about the spiritual life. Wind is not just wind in John, like with Nicodemus.
Yeah.
It always refers to the spirit as well.
Mm-hmm.
As birth is never just birth in John. Birth is also spiritual rebirth.
Okay.
So John has double meanings all the way through. It's one of the great features of John. Double meanings all the way through. So at the cross, I believe, at the cross when Jesus says, "Woman, behold your son," and then to the disciple, "Behold your mother," he's not only taking care of mom, he's also creating the new family
Yeah.
that goes beyond blood ties. And in that time and place, that was a radical thing, to see family as beyond mere blood ties.
Okay.
So he's creating the new family there.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if that disciple needed a mom.
That could be too. Yep. But, right, it could very well be. Yeah. Yep. Could be he needed a mom. And the
Or a
only way
family.
he'd ever get one would be to go beyond biological ties, right?
Yeah.
Beyond blood ties. And of course, this this notion that Jesus creates the new family, and that's just another instance from the cross that Jesus doesn't only talk about a righteousness that reaches out in love, he actually enacts it and creates it from the cross as well. When he says, "Woman, behold your son," and then to the disciple, "Behold your mother," Jesus takes care of them, but also he creates the new family. And later on, this kind of thought will be extended in the writings of Paul in the New Testament. In Galatians, I think it's chapter 3, Paul says, "In Christ there is neither male nor female, neither Greek nor Jew, neither slave nor free in Christ." There's a new reality in Christ. And that's kind of what happens there at the cross in John. So Jesus not only talked, he did, right? He
Yeah.
performed something. And Jesus isn't only about God, Jesus is God, right? We not only talk, it's not only the Christian thing to talk about God, but it's also to focus on that God has acted, right? God acts in our lives.
Yeah.
But that still, the question remains for us, why does Jesus, though, give this, why doesn't he just reiterate that for them? Why doesn't he just say, look at what's happened here?
Yeah.
You know, love is being enacted in your presence. I'm doing love in this place, you know?
Yeah.
Focus upon that. That's my authority. By the way, we should clarify, the word for authority,
Oh yeah.
it is also the word translated as power. It can be translated power.
And then you also had the Greek word for authority?
Yeah, well, the Greek word is exousia, or exousia, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Exousia, which literally means out of your being, right?
Interesting.
Literally.
Yeah.
Ousia, it means being, and the word ek means out of.
Okay.
But that can also be translated as power. So it's not, and really that's what authority is, right? Authority is power. If I have the authority, if I have the authority to put you in jail, that means I have the power to put you in jail, right?
Right.
So they're wondering, in our terms, they're asking Jesus, okay, you seem to have this strange power in both word and deed. Where do you get that from? Where do you get that from?
Yeah.
And so, why does Jesus give that snarky response? He asks them, well, where did John get his authority from? Where did John get his power? And they know that either way the answer is going to get them into some kind of trouble or make them look foolish. So they simply answer, oh, we don't know. And Jesus says, well, I'm not going to tell you where I get my power from either. So he's being snarky. But the question raised in Thielicke's sermon is, why is Jesus being snarky like that? Why does he seem to be playing cat and mouse with them? And what it seems to be, and this will take us to our next section, what it seems to be is he realizes they're not taking him seriously enough. They're not asking a serious question. They're kind of playing with the question, right?
Yeah.
They're just kind of playing. They're playing cat and mouse games.
Yeah.
They're not taking him seriously. He wants to know that their question is serious, so he's pushing them that way, right?
Right.
He wants to know that they're being serious. There was an old tennis player now. I would say now old. To me, he was young and brash and with it, at the time. His name was John McEnroe.
Yeah.
And he was known for his bold speech on the tennis court in a sport where everybody was quiet and polite until Jimmy Connors, who was McEnroe's peer. McEnroe would often stand in the court and yell at the referees. He would yell, "Are you serious? Are you serious?" And in a way, Thielicke says that's what Jesus is saying to these questioners,
Yeah.
right? To these religious leaders. Are you being serious? How serious are you in your question? And I think we leave this to our next section as we continue to talk about this passage from Matthew chapter 21. Thank you for tuning in so far to this.
Yep.
We're really glad that you're with us. Leave any questions or comments that you would like as you look at the links here.
Yep. And thank you for joining us. God bless.
God bless.